this NAGAP webinar. This is Marcus Hanscom, your Technology Chair on the NAGAP board. And I'm really excited for the panel of folks that we have here talking to you about GEM and all the various research that we've done, and also talk to you about the professional development opportunities available to you and what we're doing within NAGAP to really help address those various spokes of the wheel for GEM that can help you as a professional. So you're going to have four people on the line today. You got Josh LaFay from SUNY Potsdam, Chris Connor from SUNY Buffalo, Ariana Belan from just down the street here in Connecticut, Sacred Heart University, and my good friend Linda Horace from Fordham University. So I'm going to pass it off to Josh, and I hope you have a great session. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them in the questions box, and we'll have an opportunity to ask those of the panelists at the end of the session. So thanks again for joining us, and here's Josh.
Great, thank you, Marcus. And to everybody that's online here today, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and listen to us and learn a little bit more about some of the work that a lot of us have been up to over the past couple of years. Some of the contents of this presentation is taken from last April at the Friday plenary session. Christopher Connor and I presented some of the results of about a 1.5-year long research on understanding this emergence of graduate enrollment management. So we're going to revisit some of that today. But more importantly, we're going to revisit that also in the context of what has NAGAP been doing to address some of the things we've learned about our membership and the profession at large. So today's webinar is titled Moving Forward in GEM, Establishing Meaning, Best Practices, and Professional Growth. The other purpose of this webinar is to help prepare us for the conference coming up 2 weeks from Monday. I fly out, very excited, where the conference theme is GEM Defined. And we have a couple of specific sessions we want to mention about that, but this is to help get everybody on the same page as we prepare to go forward into the conference. And for those of you that are not able to attend the conference, we want to make sure that you are kept in the loop on everything that's going on, regardless if you're able to physically be there or not. However, I just wanted to let everybody know that we do have quite a lot of things to talk about today. And for those of you that know some of us, we like to talk. So we're going to do our best to make sure there's time at the end for questions. But I just want to quickly say at the end we'll provide our email addresses. And if for some reason we don't get to your question, feel free to reach out to us or try to find us at the conference. So again, just some quick introductions. For time saving, I'm just going to quickly introduce my friends and colleagues. So first, obviously myself, I work in upstate New York, SUNY Potsdam. For those of you familiar with SUNY, we like to call ourselves SUNY Canada. We're so close to the border. I am your current NAGAP Secretary, past Research and Global Issues Chair, and past NAGAP President. We have Chris Connor, Assistant Dean for Graduate Enrollment Management Services, as well as current Interim Director of Undergraduate Admissions at SUNY Buffalo. So he's doing a little bit of everything, and he also serves on the Research Committee. Linda Horace is the Assistant Dean at the Fordham Graduate School of Education, and she is the current Chair of the Education Committee and current JGAP President. Ariana Belan, Assistant Director of Graduate Admissions at Sacred Heart University, currently the NAGAP President in New England, and a member of the Research and Global Issues Chair Committee. And not speaking today, but want to just give special thanks to Matt Cipriano. He is the Manager of Enrollment and Academic Programs at Weill Cornell University of Biomedical Sciences and the current Chair on the board serving the Research and Global Issues. And he's been very helpful with a lot of this research project and helping us get ready for today. So special thanks to Matt as well. So today's agenda is, again, pretty full, so we're going to do our best to get through this. But just starting off with driving forces, we looked at what were the reasons for change and adaptation. When we started talking in focus groups about two and a half years ago, what were some of the reasons that people were having to do more with less, having to do different types of jobs other than strictly admissions? We're going to have a quick literature review. What does the literature say about graduate enrollment management? Have a quick conversation about the existing structures, looking at operationally what are the differences between undergraduate and graduate admissions and enrollment. And then we want to provide you with a sampling of some of the working models and definitions of graduate enrollment management, which is essentially the outcome of all of the work in the research committee had done and defining GEM and creating working models that can be used as best practices and trying to understand how to adapt some of those things to your own institution. Outcomes and next stages, so we're just going to share briefly what we've learned from some of the research. There's actually a white paper that's coming out that I believe is going to be provided to you at the conference of the full gamut of the research that was done. So we're just going to share a couple of slides, but there will be more specific information available through that. And what are the next stages? And when I say next stages, one of the most important things, and the reason that we've invited, really wanted Linda to be here, is the integration with education in NAGAP. Her committee has worked very hard to align a lot of the work they're doing with the working model and the definitions and the ideal GEM professional, and she's going to address a lot of that with you today. So not only about what it is and what is what we have come up with as far as what graduate enrollment management is, but more importantly, what is NAGAP doing to address the changing needs of our members and become and sustain ourselves as leaders in graduate enrollment management. So that's going to be the agenda. It sounds simple, but we have a lot to talk about. So as far as the driving factors, this is, there are certainly more in-depth particular attributes, and there are a lot of other things that we could all likely agree would be specifically driving forces and factors that led to this concept of understanding the emergence of graduate enrollment management versus graduate admissions and so on, is to do more with less. While in some areas of the country we might be coming out of areas of economic restraint, we were and still are, to some of us, getting into situations where we have to do more with less. And we could use the old adage of job enlargement, but essentially with resources being restricted, we still want to be able to provide the same level of service, still want to be able to meet those enrollment numbers, and so on and so forth. So in order to do more with less, and we're being forced to do that, how can we embrace that in a positive way? Increase resilience of graduate and professional enrollment. Structures not in sync with the pace of change. Just in the short research alone, I would say if you sat down with a table of 10 people, 9 of the 10 would have a different structure, completely different structure, not only in terms of reporting, but job responsibilities and titles and duties, and really hard to identify what was a specific format. More competition, the need to be more adapt to change, the need to be able to provide a higher level of service at the same time when you need to be thinking quicker and moving quicker with regards to admissions and recruitment. Changing landscape of expectations. We're noticing in a lot of the research that came out, really looked at the graduate level of becoming more of a focus on the retention as a critical component of recruitment. And not as a standalone, but as part of the enrollment modeling and planning process, is really incorporating not only the front end, but the back end, and also looking at other pieces to retention, such as stop-out rates that tend to be higher at the graduate level. So how does that all contribute to the planning of your enrollment goals on the front end? Faculty are getting younger. The research focus for tenure is more resilient on support services. Younger faculty are getting more involved in the recruitment process. And if they are not, is it an opportunity where we would like them to be? One of the keys that we have found in our research, and one of the things you'll see later on in the model, is that faculty in particular is really one of the key differentiators as far as the recruitment and retention of students, and getting stakeholders involved at every stage of the life cycle. And then a need for a concrete identity and presence on campus. So in a lot of conversations that we've had with everyone, is that there is this disconnect that happens on our campuses between graduate and senior leadership. And I think Chris will address that a little bit more. But we need an identity. People need to know not only what we do, but how is it different. I've heard a lot of times where senior leaders just, they might say, well, it's graduate admissions, not realizing that it might be a one-stop shop, or you might handle other things, and need to kind of emerge as how is it different and how the needs are different in order to succeed at the graduate level. And just having an overall identity and understanding in terms of what you do for students on campus. Went the wrong way, sorry about that. So now that we kind of set up, what kind of was the driving forces, what's causing us to want to shift, I'm trying to understand what is this idea of graduate enrollment management, and looking at other different functions and looking at other different components and who's involved. We wanted to take a look at what does the research say? What is out there that specifically addresses graduate enrollment management? Many of you are very familiar, I'm sure, with the concept of SEM. But what is it, in the context of GEM, what was out there? So I'm going to pass this over to Ariana, who led the charge on kind of constructing and researching and identifying what was out there, what wasn't out there, and what were some opportunities with regards to this project. So, Ariana, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Josh, and go ahead with the next slide if you don't mind. So before we determine what is out there in GEM, it was necessary to ground us in academic literature for enrollment management, EM, or SEM, strategic enrollment management. Enrollment management grew out of a concept, as you may know, from a 1970s Boston College initiative, the idea that the era of accountability in higher ed is imperative to the way that we're going to approach the undergraduate student life cycle. So that concept came not too long ago and has since evolved into strategic enrollment management, and then, as we are on the forefront, graduate enrollment management. This idea that collaborative systems and this process can lead to sustainable growth. So across the campus, it can have a positive impact. We also can build on the traditional admissions funnel. It doesn't necessarily need to end right at enrollment, but it's important to look at how our students are retained, as Josh mentioned, and how we can get them to successfully graduate and be not only donors, but supportive alumni after they graduate. So there's a whole spectrum of the undergraduate world that you can ground our GEM research in. But as you're going to see, there is not a whole lot of academic research out there on graduate enrollment management. Go ahead, Josh. Thank you. So in my research for my dissertation, which is on professional development, I did do a literature review and found that there is quite a significant gap in academic literature on graduate enrollment management. In fact, if you type the term graduate enrollment management with quotation marks encompassing all three words in one go, you will get just a few results. So that gave us an opportunity as we are developing this project, and wanted to really ground it in what does exist. Some notable exceptions, I'm saying that there is a large gap, but some exceptions are Kristen Williams' publication from 2008, our Monique Snowden, her dissertation in 2010 and an article in 2012, and Cabell and Smith, 2014. These articles are in our reference page, and all four of those authors have affiliations with NAGAP, so that's wonderful as well. But it represents just a small chunk of what we're capable of in terms of grounding our sector, our profession, in academic literature, establishing validity, and really positioning ourselves. So one can apply concepts from enrollment management and strategic enrollment management to GEM. However, it's up to us as a call to action, let's say, to really get some concrete research as we're doing and then get it out there in the academic community to really ground GEM specifically.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Connor, SUNY Buffalo. Before I begin and kind of discuss the two differences between the undergrad and graduate models, this past year I've had the fortune or misfortune of wearing two hats both at the undergraduate and graduate levels in leadership roles, managing graduate and undergraduate admissions, which has given me a unique look into the similarities and differences with both structures. The undergraduate model is viewed as being a very unified model with institutional advocacy, and it's relatively simplistic. For example, the institution is based upon a single metric of SAT for a profile, high school GPA. It's relatively a similar entry point when you're evaluating applicants, and that also persists through the umbrella for enrollment management as being under one umbrella. There's primary support for campus leadership, and that support is generally proactive. Undergraduate is generally thought about from a longer-term enrollment planning process and has a seat at the table as a part of the equation. And this is one that many of us who have been in graduate education for many years are painfully aware. There are higher staffing levels and budgets, and the budgets, yes, it makes sense because generally on most of our campuses, there are more undergraduate students than there are graduate, but per capita, we still have lower budgets to be able to offset the amount of revenue that we're bringing in. There are definitive starting and stopping points of staff roles and responsibilities in an undergraduate model. For example, you have an undergraduate admissions office. The handoff then goes to new student orientation. The handoff then may go to financial aid. There are different points where those primary roles and responsibilities have a definitive starting and stopping point. However, one thing that I have found particularly interesting this past year on my campus is I'm noticing that there has been a push and more of an emergence to differentiate ourselves within the profession of being able to become more academically minded in order to recruit and retain students. For example, we have introduced at the undergraduate level this year something that is much more graduate-esque in the sense of an academic holistic review that is helping us at the undergraduate level differentiate ourselves among our competitors. From conversations and information that we've been able to receive through our research over the past year and a half, this theme is continuing where undergraduate is becoming more like graduate. At the graduate model, on the graduate side of the house, graduate model-wise, and I think many of us are painfully aware, we have fractured institutional advocacy. And what I mean by that is if many of us work in individual academic units, all of our needs are very different. There is a broad brush stroke by senior leadership often put on to individual areas thinking that it's just graduate. Well, you may be in a school of social work and have much different needs versus those who are in a school of engineering or a school of management. Trends are often different depending upon the individual niche-based differences for the academic programs. We have a tendency to receive secondary support from the campus leadership, and it's generally reactive, meaning that we are not at the table during those longer-term enrollment planning exercises, and if we are, it's more reactive rather than proactive. We have a tendency to have to do more with less, as Josh reiterated earlier, and there is an evolution, as we will see in a few minutes, and many of us are aware of, is towards increasing responsibilities of our roles beyond the primary function in which we were hired. And there's also an emergence that we're starting to see with a service-based focus in many of our areas, meaning we are looking more towards retaining students and services that we can provide in order to provide the best student experience, which helps us recruit those students.
Thank you, Chris. So what we'd like to do now, and again, we apologize if we're moving a little quick, but we definitely want to make sure that we provide enough time for all of the components and hopefully some questions at the end. But what we'd like to do now is move into really some of the output of the work that we've been talking about as far as doing the literature review, what was generated some of the conversation that we had a few years ago, and really come up with definitions, what does graduate enrollment management mean? And what are some models that we could use as benchmarks when trying to develop something at our own institution? And again, this is definitely descriptive models. By no means do we say that in a utopian world you have to, these models have to be in place in a prescriptive sense. These are working models that we have found to be successful in meeting the needs from what we've learned of our members, and that we are changing the way in which we conduct business to provide support to our members. So these are models that I've actually talked to people that use all of them, all of it in conjunction. Some of them are use it in partiality depending on what they're able to do. But in any way, so the point is, and I'll get to it, is that it doesn't have to be used holistically to support the outcomes of this research. But these are models that we have found to be kind of best practices, or if everything in the world with stars were to align, this is what you would be able to do kind of thing. So I always like to start with a little humor. Some find it funny, some just start crying. But one of the things that we have seen, obviously, is this idea of silos in higher education. You have your admissions, and then you pass the files over to student services, who then passes it to financial aid, or maybe everybody has their own file, has their own thing. However, so we like to kind of just start with that. And the Serving Higher Education since 1636. So the first person to find me at the conference and tell me what was the first school in the U.S. to start in that year, I will buy you a lunch or something. So anyway, moving on. So the interdependent model, if you will, the practice of siloing aspects of the student life cycle. So, and again, these are just a couple of areas that we talk about. If you look at the whole life cycle from awareness to alum, you have enrollment planning, enrollment modeling, admissions and recruitment, financial aid, whether it's grant scholarships or federal loan processing, new student services, what does that look like? Academic advising, graduation. Again, this is not a definitive list for this particular slide, just to show you that, in many aspects on our campus, this is what has been happening. and especially since a lot of programs are run within their own departments, you see a lot of that happening on a smaller, minute level, as well as from the perspective of the entire graduate student population. So to kind of start, before we share some of the newer models, what we wanted to do is provide you with a couple of different versions of what we are using as working models of graduate enrollment management. So we like to start with this one because a lot of times we call it the elevator version, because maybe somebody will say, hey, what is graduate enrollment management? So the way that we like to describe it is that it's a comprehensive approach to managing the graduate student life cycle from initial awareness to alumna or alumnus by integrating the core functions associated with the enrollment and support of a graduate student. So that would be the simple elevator version. Obviously, later on, we want to go into a little bit more detail. And again, even more depth can be found in the white paper that you will have access to as well. So a hypothesis working model of integrated interdependence has the emphasis of the student experience in constrictive resource environments while improving productivity and nurturing efficiency. So this can be seen in a lot of different ways. The student experience at the graduate level is much different, especially if we're talking about doctorate, postdoctorate, graduate. A lot of the different needs are going to be different, but how do we do that in constrictive environments where you might not have an opportunity or the resources or a lot of other different factors are up against you, where you still need to be productive, you still need the office to be efficient, but you don't want to jeopardize the services that you're able to provide the student. Not only the services, but also, especially for those of you that might have a lot of your own undergraduates that stay at your campus, you want to be able to provide a differentiated student experience. You don't want them to feel like they're a fifth-year senior. You want them to feel like they have an elevated status. So how can we do that when we have to do more with less, as Chris had mentioned? Integrating various functions in support of others. So for example, leveraging student resources in recruitment. And some of you might do this already without having a definitive approach to it. But what we mean by this is, okay, so maybe you offer some programming, or you do professional development funding or something for current students. Well, these are talking points that you can use in the recruitment side, or involving people that do work specifically or champion student services to be able to work in tandem with those that might be conducting a recruitment. And again, I think a lot of us find that we do these things without giving it an actual definition or place, if you will, in the realm of graduate enrollment management. Encourage stakeholders to be engaged in every part of the student experience. Earlier we talked about faculty. Well, faculty don't need to just teach the students. A lot of our younger faculty, and I know a lot of you might be laughing because sometimes it's difficult to get faculty engagement, but this is so important at the graduate level, not only from the recruitment side, maybe even having them join us at orientation, building that relationship, especially for those that might be specifically working with a faculty member on their doctorate as a thesis advisor, a dissertation advisor, excuse me. So there's a lot of different components to this, but faculty are not the only stakeholder. We'll talk a little bit about that in another slide. The other component that we've kind of learned from the research and talked about is it's one thing to have these models in an integrated fashion. It's one thing to look at the big picture of a student experience and life cycle, but it's also about cross-trained teams. One of the things we'll talk about is not just having someone that just processes applications or someone that just plans orientation, but develop areas where your staff champion certain areas but are cross-trained to support in others. So if they're the only ones in the office, they can still get a student registered for class, for example. And then build bridges beyond the academic units to the key strategic administrative leaders. And again, we've talked about this earlier in the presentation, and by no means is this about that the disconnect is always there on every campus. In fact, some of you might have a really good bridge between the academic units and other key administrative leaders on campus who know exactly what happens at the graduate level, who understand that you might be out on the road recruiting and you're also responding to emails about advising. So there are definitely, it's not 100% out there. By no means do we mean it that way, but there is a gap. In the research that we've conducted and talking to folks is that a lot of the strategic administrative leaders don't really understand everything that happens. So building a model that kind of integrates them right into the process can help build those bridges and create better synergy. And that has to do with things as planning and budgets, looking at the strategic enrollment management plan for the campus, as Chris had mentioned, doing it together as a proactive way instead of reactive, and bringing issues to the surface to increase awareness. So one of the things, and I can certainly provide a couple of examples of what we've been able to do here as I share this. So to visually represent what we're trying to say, this would be the integrated interdependent model, where we identify some of the core areas, and again, not putting them in a silo, but as really a continuous process through the student life cycle from awareness to alumnus. Now, even though some of the main headers here, recruitment and marketing, financing, education, admissions, operations, and student services, keep in mind that the next stage of this research and the next phase of some of the things we want to learn is to dive deeper into each one of these areas. So as an example, and this is something that I've done for the new Institute for New GEM Professionals, is student services. The way that I like to view it is 4 O's. You have onboarding, orientation, ongoing, and outgoing. So if you look at it from that perspective, there's so many more things to talk about under each of those areas. But let's keep it at 30,000-foot view for today, looking at the enrollment modeling, strategic planning, recruitment and marketing, financing, all of them in an integrated way, moving together through the student life cycle. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 would be the center, the cross-trained graduate enrollment office. So as an example, we have in our office champions for onboarding and orientation. We have a champion for recruitment. But both of them are able to support each other's functions and be able to support in other ways, smaller ways, such as being able to register a student and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, you have to be careful of scope because you want to make sure that one person isn't trying to take on too much or feel overwhelmed. But really, it's more about you champion a certain area, you understand and you can support students in other areas, which then enhances the student experience because we're not sending them across campus to do all of these different things, but they can come here, and if we can't take care of it, we'll take care of a referral or so on and so forth. But the more that you can embrace, the more that you can work together with other departments, and the more cross-training allows for that growth and that differentiated experience. And again, that team would work, and the arrow is pointing out in every direction, they work to support each of these different areas, obviously each person at a different stage or different level of responsibility. The last piece are the stakeholders. So the senior leadership, administrative stakeholders, faculty stakeholders, alumni ambassadors, student ambassadors. We're using the word ambassadors, but really they're stakeholders. And being able to leverage their engagement. Obviously, a lot of us use alumni for recruitment, use students for recruitment, but that becomes an integral part of everything that we do. Staff partners, making sure that whether you have clerical that can do certain things or you have other different staff, everything down to the janitor in your building. Do they know what you do, and do they know how that they can direct a student if there's a question, where you're located, and just having that kind of that buy-in. And the last piece, the big piece, is a Graduate Enrollment Management Council. This is something that I started about a year ago. And what's nice about it is, for some of you that might have a big enrollment management council at the institutional level, this is a focus particularly on grad. And we invite senior leaders to come, our VP for enrollment, our provost, our president, come, and they're able to learn more about what's going on in each of our programs. So that is one of the really core pieces, if I could say anything, that really is important as part of this model. So again, this is a working model of an integrated view, an integrated independent view in GEM, where everything is relying on one another. It's a cross-trained team, and you leverage stakeholders, and you establish strategies for open communication throughout the entire life cycle of the graduate student. So said a lot, and again, I'd love to talk more in person about that, but definitely need to move on. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris, who will look at this model from the view of large institutions and whether or not the model I have shared would work for schools that have hundreds of graduate programs and thousands of graduate students. So Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Josh. So as many of you are, if you're from large institutions, are thinking about this concept, at SUNY Buffalo we have approximately 10,000 graduate students, and to have a model like this work, although it is good, does it make sense for a larger school? What are some of the challenges that you can encounter having a model like this at a larger school? One in particular has to do with central recruiting versus academic unit recruiting. When you're a larger institution, it makes more sense to have a school of management or a school of social work have their own group responsible for recruitment and retention services. Also, thinking about other aspects, the buy-in from senior leadership. What sense does it make to have a central office? Where is there the duplication, and making sure that there's some clarity surrounding that? Is it utopian to expect individuals to be cross-trained? Role definitions are blurry at best, and staffing levels are a concern. Josh, next slide. To visualize what I'm speaking of, what we came up with was an integrated interdependence Nexus model, which actually took the integrated interdependence model and put them based upon school. For example, school number 1 may be a school of management, school number 2 may be a school of education. They have their own mini Nexus models within those schools. However, being mindful of the fact there needs to be centralized coordination of the entire graduate enterprise to enhance the visibility within an institution to the strategic leadership and stakeholders at an institution to be more in line with the strategic enrollment management goals and aspirations of an institution. This also includes engaging other aspects of the student life cycle in those conversations and operating as one cohesive entity. It's important to keep in mind that through this modeling, academic units within a single institution may have varying levels of dependency on central support. So you may find that a central office may be more heavily involved in supporting a College of Arts and Sciences versus a business school. The Central GEM office serves as a nexus between senior leadership and the academic unit. And I had talked about coordination as being a key, making sure that the pieces are all working together and that issues that are residing in the academic units are getting the appropriate attention in central administration. It also enhances collaboration between multiple schools coming together around the table. Josh had talked about a graduate enrollment council. We have a graduate enrollment managers group at our university that brings all academic units from across the university together at the graduate level to talk about issues and share ideas and make sure messaging is being handled through institutional leadership. It's also important to keep in mind that this type of model helps unify all aspects of the graduate student life cycle as one coordinated entity and increases and enhances the evolution of our profession. Very briefly, NAGAP last year surveyed its membership as well as those who have collaborated with several organizations directly involved with NASPA. And you could see the breakdown here of those who had participated. It was about 490 responses, I believe, that we had received for the survey. And of those surveys, the data was of the survey data, it was very telling. As you can see to the right, there has been an apparent shift from our roles and responsibilities being focused solely on admissions and recruitment to a broadening of roles and responsibilities in other areas of the enrollment management cycle. Specifically, the top 4 areas that we're focused on were student services, student success and retention, new program and curriculum development, marketing and communications, and enrollment management. This was also very telling for us to be able to see the emergence of what the GEM professional and the direction that the profession was heading. Some generalized outcomes from the results of these surveys. There are some stark differences between undergraduate and graduate enrollment management. The strategic alignment of GEM by our institution's senior leadership revealed a disconnect. Strategic enrollment management generally remains at a dean's level, and higher level involvement is reserved for headcount issues or short-term situations. And again, that also gets back to the point of being reactive rather than proactive. Also, our members had responded that communication functions between areas needed to be enhanced, and also enhancing the collaboration opportunities to help strengthen the overall enrollment management structure. And lastly, partnerships. This was a key where we were starting to notice more and more handoff between offices, and then increased collaboration between offices such as financial aid and registrar and other aspects of the student life cycle.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. And some of you might notice that we're starting to speed up a little bit. I apologize, but in managing time, I want to make sure we have time, give enough time to Linda, who has a lot of really, really important things to say. So, and again, we'll go into more detail in the white paper, and happy to talk in person. But this is just kind of a bigger working, more full working definition of GEM. Represents a comprehensive approach to the methods by which an institution recruits, admits, supports, retains, and graduates post-baccalaureate students in their respective degree programs. This dynamic paradigm includes codependent functions working congruently to strategically manage enrollment levels and the student experience. These include enrollment planning, marketing, recruitment and admissions, advising, financial aid, student services, retention, and alumni relations. So before handing this all over to Linda, kind of a wrap-up slide, if you will, and kind of leading that towards what NAGAP has been doing with all of this information is what does it tell us and where do we go? So many of us are experiencing the growing pains of GEM. We've heard that quite a bit. We just kind of coined the growing pains term, but a lot of changing responsibilities with a broader focus, and that parallels a lot of the changes and, again, the research results of the NAGAP membership. And while this might not be 100% of the membership, a lot of the folks that are hired today are hired at a different job description per se than someone even 5 years ago. There's been an emergence of the strategic accountability and responsibility at the operational level, especially as Chris talks about with headcount issues and being reactive, but really being able to rise to a higher level of being able to be at the table more specifically, but more importantly, what's happening is a lot more accountability on the enrollment modeling and planning at the lower levels, and being asked to prepare and predict a lot of things that have traditionally been held at a higher administrative level. Responsibility to act as change agents and advocates by increasing the visibility, knowledge, uniqueness, and importance of graduate education. We have to fight the fight, if it were, on our campus and make sure that people understand what the differences are. And it's our responsibility to advocate for ourselves, just like when we go to the doctors and advocate for ourselves. Better define what we do. Be more out there participating in campus committees and projects, and educating senior leadership and key stakeholders of what the differences are, what some of the needs are, and where the campus might be able to help to improve them. And then a closer examination of the individual organizational structures. So the Research and Global Issues Committee has been engaging with some members on developing case studies on how are they integrating concepts of graduate enrollment management at their campus. We'll talk a little bit about it at the end, but Friday, the plenary morning session, will be a panel of your fellow members that will be talking about how they are integrating concepts of graduate enrollment management that we've discussed today. So we definitely want to encourage you to plan on that. And increase partnerships with each sister organizations. There are other organizations that have traditionally held expertise in certain areas related to graduate enrollment management, as we had in the past traditionally held the admissions function. So how can we partner with niche organizations to really improve and advocate for our profession? And with that, I'd like to hand this over to Linda Horace, Chair of our Education Committee, to provide you with some really exciting information and news about what have we as an organization been doing, what has the Education Committee been working towards to integrate the results of this research and moving forward and becoming experts and leading the charge of graduate enrollment management as a profession. So, Linda?
Okay, thank you. And then, Josh, I'll just let you know when to change the slide. Okay?
Yes.
So first of all, I would like to start off by thanking our NAGAP president, James Crane, and the president before him, Joanne Canyon-Heller, for their support of these ideas as they began to come about 3.5, 4 years ago. And really for the last 2.5, almost really 3 years now, both the Research Committee and the Education Committee have been working on both the GEM model for the Research Committee, and the Education Committee has been looking to develop a curriculum goals and a curriculum map for NAGAP, and our work really paralleled the work of the Research Committee. As you can see here, this was the charge that was given to the Education Committee from our president, James Crane. So you can see that our association is really striving to create meaningful examples of best practices and professional development opportunities for our members. What we're looking for is how to identify the best practices, looking for leaders and visionaries who can present, write, and share their ideas and their best practices with our members. Next slide. And so just very briefly, you might be wondering, you're hearing a lot of us talking today to you about different NAGAP committees. So for those of you who are not aware, that the committees do have a term of office for 2 years. The composition of the committee, the chair is appointed by the president, and then this particular committee, the Education Committee, has some standing members and representation from publications, technology, conference, Professional Development Institutes Committee, as well as the Research Committee. And then there was an open application process that took place last spring, and new members were given the opportunity to apply, and that process involved an application, an essay, and an interview. Thank you. Next slide. And so what the Education Committee has been working on for the last 3 years. So that would mean another Education Committee started the work. I was on that committee, and some of us carried over to the new committee that started in 2014. But what we've been working on is looking at the research that the Research Committee had already done. And as Ariana told you all earlier in this presentation, that there really isn't much research out there on the field of GEM. And so we've really relied a lot on looking at our own NAGAP data, and we thank the Research Committee for the surveys that they did, and we did use that on the Education Committee. But we also looked at past surveys that NAGAP had done, post-professional development opportunity evaluations. You know, when you get those little surveys, you know, what did you think? What did you learn? Do you have any suggestions for us? We went through years of that, actually. We were like archaeologists at a dig, going through the archives of NAGAP. We also looked at what were our offerings in the past, as far as what were the topics, what were the speakers, what kinds of things were we publishing at that time. And another guidebook that was very helpful to us was a publication that was done by CGS and NAGAP, best practices and a guide to admissions. So we did find that helpful. And as you can see, as you're looking at the screen here while I'm speaking, we also tried to integrate Bloom's taxonomy into our levels of learning and our instructional delivery modes for all of our professional development offerings. So what we're hoping that you will see starting this year was that we weren't just classifying our professional development offerings, and we'll use conference as an example, as beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Because what that used to relate to was number of years in the field. So we felt very strongly that it should be targeted at the level of learning of the potential participants in a particular professional development opportunity. And so we made a shift to from understanding to interpreting and to analyzing and synthesizing. And so we call those levels of learning tactical, operational, and strategic. So you will see that in your conference program. So be thinking of that when you are selecting the things that you might be interested in attending if you're with us in New Orleans in a few weeks. We also created rubrics for our professional development offerings. We have rubrics to evaluate conference proposals, to evaluate speakers and presenters, and we really felt that that has really helped us to kind of target what it is we're exactly looking for and how well does it fit into our educational plan. The other thing that we did was to standardize the evaluation tools for all of our professional development offerings, where indeed there's a common set of questions. This will help us later on when we are evaluating our professional development offerings, so that we can be comparing apples to apples, so to speak, and will help us to analyze our data in a much more meaningful way. Next slide. Another thing that we did, so we did all of this research, and then, now where do we start? How do we move on from here to create a curriculum map? And so what we did is we stepped back from the work and said, what is the biggest question that we need to answer? And how can it frame our work? We needed a broader vision. The data was good. We knew it would help, but we needed something more than that. So what we did is we spent time at one of our meetings, which we do meet in person at least twice a year on the Education Committee, and we asked ourselves the essential question, what should an ideal GEM professional know and be able to do, and what would he or she really want to learn more about? And so what we came up with was a monster of a spreadsheet, you can imagine, of skills, knowledge, and qualities or characteristics. And then this became the roadmap for our ongoing journey and quest to create even more meaningful learning opportunities for our colleagues in NAGAP. Next slide. And so just very briefly, I thought you might want to take a look at what some of these skills and knowledge and qualities might look like. So please do keep in mind the GEM model that Josh and Chris and Ariana were just speaking with you about. So we're talking here about the full life cycle, from a recruit, from a prospect, right on up to alumni. So those of us working in the GEM field, these would be some of the skills on the list that the ideal professional should possess, and how can we as a professional organization help you to learn more about some of these different areas. And again, keeping in mind the very important piece of this, which we know there will be different levels of learning. So let's take data as an example. Some of our members might not know the first thing about how to collect the data, how to organize it, and then moving on, how to interpret the data. So now you're seeing the progression from the tactical to the operational to the strategic piece of it, which would be, now that I have the data, I've analyzed it, I have my percentages, I can come up with some enrollment goals, but what are going to be my next steps? And how can I integrate and to operationalize what I have learned for next steps, and how can I synthesize all of this? So you will see how that works out in our professional development opportunities. Of course, something like a skill of technology, our jobs have become more technology-based over the years, and there would be different levels of learning, obviously, in a skill like that. Next slide. This is the knowledge slide here, and so once again, it's part of our vision for the ideal GEM professional. So let's just take as an example one of the ones in column 1, which is ethics and legal. And so we know that there are ethical and legal implications in everything that we do. It's the underpinning of the GEM professional's responsibilities, from FERPA to financial aid, from your own university guidelines to state regulations, from admissions requirements to certification and licensing requirements, should your professional programs include these. So in everything that we do, we have to consider what are the legal and ethical implications and requirements that we need to be aware of, and how do we operationalize this, how do we teach our staff about this, and sometimes also how do we share these things with faculty as well, especially for those of us who are in shops where faculty are evaluating applications. Another one that we might want to slice and dice just a little bit is the fact that in the knowledge base, you need to strive to be an expert. You have to do your research. You need to know about the basics of adult learners and what are the implications for that knowledge that you have or that you learn more about, how does that knowledge integrate with all of these other knowledge bases as well? Because whatever you do in the field of GEM, you have to know your audience and what their needs are. Can we look at the next page so we can take a look at some of the qualities or characteristics? And so this is from a longer list, obviously, but when we were developing this list, and actually we weren't just developing a list, we were the kings and queens of sticky notes all over the President's dining room here at Fordham where we hosted the meeting. But once again, we took a step back and we were debating the very pithy questions of, can these qualities be taught? Are they innate? You either have it or you don't. Leaders, are they born or can some people become leaders? It's the same for GEM professionals. And so with that, we were able to develop our list, and we concluded that we believe that we can find, that your education committee and that your organization can find the role models in presenters and speakers who can teach and who can share what these qualities look like and provide examples of the qualities in action. And then we also have to back us up what the research says about the effectiveness of these characteristics in the workplace, because that is something that would be beyond just GEM, and how they apply in the workplace and how they apply in life as well. Very lofty goals. Okay, next slide. Another thing that we did was, once we had our ideal GEM professional and we have our GEM definition, what we did was to begin to operationalize all of this and pick and develop the educational themes for all of our professional development activities for the next 4 years out. So this year's theme has been GEM defined. And so you'll find examples of this at the conference, in some of the work that the Publications Committee has been doing, the PDI Committee, and we're even reaching out to our chapters as well. And I can talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We already have done a lot of planning for next year's theme, embracing collaboration in the student life cycle. And then the next one is measuring success and sustainability. So you can kind of see what we've done here if you haven't figured this part out already just by looking at them. But we're following the progression of the GEM model, and we're also building in a feedback cycle here also, where you're starting out with a definition, we're getting to how are we going to measure the success, and how are we going to sustain it, what needs to be tweaked along the way, and then kind of move back through that cycle in everything that we do. Next slide. And so what we did from the themes was to develop educational domains. And so these educational domains, once again, follow the GEM model of the student life cycle. So we start with recruitment and marketing, financing education, admissions operations, student services, alumni, enrollment modeling and strategic planning, and then the one that applies specifically to you, the GEM professional, and how can we help you with your career, staff, and personal development. Okay, what we have on this slide is the educational plan in action. So as I have mentioned before, the Education Committee is kind of the umbrella committee for some of the work of some of the other professional development arms of NAGAP. We work very collaboratively and closely with the Research Committee, but our work has impact on what will be done at our conference each year, for our Professional Development Institute, which currently run in summer and in fall, for our publications, our e-news. Been many changes done by the Publications Committee this year, very diligent work under the leadership of Jen Colbeck, and you will be seeing Perspectives, our magazine, in a new way with the inclusion of more peer-reviewed articles and white papers. And so what you're seeing occurring within NAGAP is professionalization of our work and moving us to a different level. We've done a lot of research on what other organizations do, and we have found some very good best practices out there. Of course, Technology Committee, that is our webinars, and Marcus is the chair of that committee. And also now we are beginning to have conversations with the NAGAP chapter presidents as well, with how they can integrate the educational plan. The other thing that we are doing is really expanding upon what started as a spreadsheet of potential speakers and tracking speakers we've used in the past. And we're talking about some of the, big speakers that we bring in for conferences and PDIs. And so we're always welcoming getting suggestions from our membership for this as well. Next slide. And just to give you just a very brief overview here, because I see that technically I have 1 minute left and some people probably need to go, but that is just to let you know that we do have a feasibility study going on right now for 2 of the ideas that the Education Committee has created. One is to create a GEM certificate program, which would include coursework that would lead to an actual certificate. And the other is to host a GEM Leadership Institute. We do have a university who is interested in partnering with us. So some of you on the call might have gotten an invitation to be part of a focus group at our upcoming conference, or I know you all who are members got a survey and some questions were asked as well. So our consulting firm will be finishing up and making recommendations to the board hopefully by May of this year. The Education Committee has also created a glossary of GEM-related terms where, we're codifying our language as well, so you'll be seeing that very soon. And then we have also identified topics related to the educational domains and the theme for next year, because we are getting ready, the conference committee is getting ready to launch for the 2016 school year, or 2015-16, excuse me. And what we hope that we've been able to do is to create more collaboration and dialogue among the committees and the chapters, because we really hope that we are fostering an enhanced experience, and that our members, our learners, are going to see that a plan is in place and that learning agendas complement and build upon one another. And we think that's very important for us to be able to help you in your work. Next slide. Okay, and then just the last couple of slides here. This is a sneak preview, if you haven't already registered, for some of the actual topic sessions that are going to be at our New Orleans conference, broken down by the educational domains. So you can just take a moment to take a look at some of those, and you'll see some of the things that I've been talking with you about already, about the difference between something that would be strategic in nature to something that would be at the level of a more tactical or an operational approach. Okay, you already went to the next slide. Okay, wonderful. And so you can see, let's just take the one as an example, the career staff and personal development. We have a couple of really good things that are going to be going on in that category, along with some other presentations as well. And so professional writing in GEM, evaluation and remediation, that would be something, as you can well imagine, that would be more at the tactical or operational level versus something GEM leadership advancement, helping you with your career trajectory, something a little bit more strategic for you. So I certainly hope that this overview has helped you have a better understanding of what the Education Committee has been doing and how much we appreciate being able to work with the Research Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you for sharing all of the great work that your committee has been doing. And it's nice to see us moving this direction. And I guess I just wanted to end this relatively quickly. We warned you we had a lot to cover, and we probably weren't going to have a lot of time. But for those of you, I see the number slowly dwindling, that have a few minutes and want to ask questions once we wrap up, I certainly would encourage, and all of us can stay online to answer any questions. But you're also welcome to shoot us an email. Or certainly try to connect with us at the conference if you're going to be there. We will have, for those of us that have been working on this project or have become privy to this concept of GEM, we'll have some buttons that says Ask Me About GEM. So if you find somebody with that and you want to have a continued dialogue about all of this, we would encourage you to do that at the conference. But certainly feel free to reach out to any of us if you want to continue to have conversations about that. Just a quick snapshot of our references, and I know that this is being recorded, so you'll be able to kind of pause it if you wanted to take a look at some of the research and articles that we have used alongside of this project. So in the interest of time, I won't leave this up for too much longer. And apparently I am now frozen, so I'm not sure what happened there, but now we're upside down. But in any event, so thank you so much for your time. We are all very grateful that you were here today with us. I really wish I knew what happened, so I'm just going to end with that. And then the last piece I would just mention before we open up to questions, again, is that Friday we have, and there's a lot of other different opportunities to engage in a conversation about GEM, but we do have a panel coming up with some of our colleagues from NAGAP just to talk about how they've been integrating some of the best practices and some of the things we've been discussing today into their institutions. And if you have, if you are somebody that is similar to that, and you think the work and experiences and challenges that you've had on your campus might make for a great case study, we certainly encourage you to contact Matt Cipriano or Ariana, members of the research chair and the member of the research committee. You can go to the NAGAP website to get their email addresses as well, as they are continuing to work on that. So I will stop talking and open up to any questions for those of you that are still here and would like to ask a question. And again, I'm sorry we're so late, but thank you so much for staying on with us.
Well, thanks, guys. That was a great session. We do have a few questions, one of which came up pretty frequently, and that's just more logistical. If any of you are interested in seeing a recording of this session, or if you want to see the slides, we will be able to send you a PDF of the slides, and we'll post the video on our YouTube channel. So if you just go to youtube.com/NAGAP video, you'll be able to see the entire recording on that later on. I'll try to get that up later this afternoon. There is a question here to the entire panel, but where do you envision the functions of data collecting, compiling, analyzing, and reporting residing, and what do they look like as GEM evolves?
I'll take that one. Hopefully the individual that asked that question will be coming to the TDI. That's upcoming. I have to do a plug before the conference, but it's an excellent question. I think it's critical for individual offices to be data rich and have an understanding of how they're measuring success, but also, real briefly, as a part of that, having a very strong connection to institutional research or institutional analysis on your particular campus is something that's extremely important. But I'd be happy to talk to you in more detail if you're going to the annual conference, or you can feel free to send me an email. I have other thoughts on that.
Great. Thanks, Chris. It doesn't look like we have any other questions at the moment. I know we've pushed a little bit over the hour, and we thank you all so much for coming. It looks like the feedback's very positive. So I want to thank all the panelists for your time. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you guys all in New Orleans coming up it's April 8th to the 11th, so we look forward to seeing you down there. And we will have some more further webinars and other opportunities for you to connect on the GEM topic. We're going to be expanding a little bit more into a series of webinars to discuss each of the various spokes of GEM, and certainly get you to connect with these folks and others going forward in the coming months. So thanks again to all of you for presenting, and thanks to all of our attendees for coming, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.